Hello, everybody. This is my first video, and it's going to be about the Wesleyan Quadrilateral and how Methodists discern truth. Okay, so why does this matter, and why am I talking about it? So, Christians, we don't just ask, what does the Bible say? We also ask, how do we understand it faithfully today? And John Wesley, through his 40,000 sermons, gave us the framework for that. Um, so this has to do with everyday questions faith has to answer and why interpretation of the Bible really matters. So, John Wesley insisted that Christianity is a religion of the heart, but that does not mean that it's anti intellectual. So, John Wesley did not actually invent the Wesleyan Quadrilateral, but his theology consisted of the use of scripture, tradition, reason, and experience all together. So, John Wesley, as we all know, was an Anglican priest at first, and he stayed as an Anglican priest until his death. Um, but he was a pastor that preached outside in fields to who knows how many people over his lifetime in the US, in the English Isles. It didn't matter where, whether it was a coal mine, a prison, he went and preached there. And he had a very big concern for our practical holiness and how we can apply it to our own lives. Um, but yeah, this quadrilateral, it is a theological framework, but we also must not forget that scripture is primary. So here's an introduction of it right here. So it's called a quadrilateral, so it's obviously a square. Um, and we're using a square because it names the four sources, like I said previously, to discern truth with scripture, tradition, reason, and experience. Now, all of these authorities are not equal. Scripture is the foundational part of this quadrilateral. Like, scripture is above all other things, period. So, this comes from the Methodist Book of Discipline as well. Scripture is the primary source and criterion for Christian doctrine. So, even our UMC Book of Discipline makes it clear that scripture is the primary source. And for us Wesleyans, scripture isn't one voice among many, it's the authority that shapes all others. And why does scripture come first? Well, scripture comes first because John Wesley believed the Bible is the foundation for everything else. The other three in this quadrilateral matter a lot, but they're meant to support, interpret, and be tested by scripture, not override it. And he wasn't the only one that believed this. Several of the reformers did as well, whether it be Martin Luther or John Calvin. And this is me talking about the foundation of everything else. They probably had some interpretation with reason and all the other things along with their beliefs, but they believed scripture was above all else. And why does it have the priority it does? Well, Methodists and most Protestants see the Bible as authoritative for salvation and Christian living. It is the clearest witness to God's actions, especially through Jesus. And tradition, reason, and experience can change or be mistaken, but scripture is the measuring stick to all of those things. And it's how we set boundaries. So there is the next thing, which is going to be tradition right here. And tradition asks how faithful Christians before us have understood scripture. What does this mean? Tradition in this case is the creeds, like the Nicene Creed or Apostles' Creed, and the other creeds, and the early church teachings, and certain councils. This also helps us avoid theological amnesia. And I think we need to make it clear. Us as Methodists, we do not undervalue tradition, but we want to use it to build on what the apostles and martyrs have already taught us. Tradition is received and it's not unquestioned. So, What's the next part? Well, we have reason here. Wesley believes reason is essential because God created us to think. Obviously, we are the images of God on this planet, and He gave us very big brains, and we're meant to use them. So, faith and logic is working together, and this can work even with science, philosophy, and interpretation. And John Wesley's perspective on reason is nuanced and balanced. He emphasized that while reason is a valuable tool for understanding and navigating life, it cannot produce the essential faith, hope, or love that lead to true happiness and virtue. And here's a quote from Thomas Paine. Yes, I know he was a deist, but I think this really sells the point here. To renounce reason is to renounce religion. And like I said, he was a deist, but I think this quote still very well applies to the Wesleyan Quadrilateral. Okay, so here's the final part of the Wesleyan Quadrilateral. This is experienced, other words known as faith being lived and felt. Experience is not just about feelings alone, it's how God's grace is encountered in real life. Whether this is through conversion, growth, transformation, community experience, it's not just personal. Yes, personal feelings have a part to do with this, but it's not just personal, it's also communal. And this happened with John Wesley at his Aldersgate in 1738. He said, I felt my heart strangely warmed. And that's when he got the real experience of Jesus and his own belief. And our experiences don't create our faith, but it confirms it. So, how are all of these supposed to work together? The quadrilateral isn't just four separate authorities, it is one method of discernment. I'm going to say that again. The quadrilateral isn't four separate authorities, it's one method of discernment. Scripture, it sets our direction, it leads everything else. Scripture is on top, it is primary, it comes first, it is prima. Scripture sets everything by far, without question, without doubt. Now, tradition, it gives us guide rails. It keeps us going towards that path. It keeps us in line. It keeps us from falling off the edge of a cliff. It is a helping step for us in our journey to Christ. Now, reason helps us interpret Scripture. Reason helps us interpret our everyday lives. Reason helps us learn and know the things that we are supposed to know. Reason helps our logic. Now, the last bit, experience, that tests our fruit, the fruits of our spirit. Experience is what we, like I said before, feel internally or communally with our gathering bodies of Christ in church. And you can find out more about these things in the section of the UMC Book of Discipline called Our Theological Task. There's several big paragraphs in there about each of these things. So, why does this matter today? And like I said before, John Wesley actually never came up with this. But it matters because the Wesleyan Quadrilateral helps Christians stay rooted without becoming rigid and relevant without losing our faithfulness. And obviously, I have seen through myself where people have misused this to prop up certain agendas. I heard a pastor online one time talking about how Scripture is not the main authority, that it's grouped with these other three, how they are all equal when that's not the case. And it's caused issues in the UMC, as we all know. It's caused schism. It's caused massive amounts of sin within our church. And I believe it's because people have misinterpreted what this is supposed to mean while allowing unorthodox progressive theology into our churches. And this quadrilateral, if it's understood correctly, it can be a great tool for our own personal discipleship. And I'm just going to close it with this. The gospel of Christ knows of no religion but social religion, no holiness but social holiness. And that is a quote from John Wesley. And here's something from me. This is how us as Methodists, we don't just believe the faith, we live it. God bless.